Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a guest for you today, Brad Baldridge. He's the founder and CEO of Taming the High Cost of College. And he's going to talk to us about late stage college planning. He's got a lot of interesting ideas, especially for kids and coming from high income families and how do you plan appropriately. We'll talk about the future of college education. Again, we have to put out a disclaimer. Brad is a certified financial planner, so we have to disclose that and be careful, as nothing is this is we're just talking concepts and throwing out there, and it's not financial advice. So with that, Brad, thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we had a interesting backstage discussion and talk about what the work that you do, why you do it, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
All right. So I help a lot of families with what I call late stage college planning. So you can kind of differentiate late stage and early stage. So early stage is, hey, college is someday. We've got a 2-year old, a 4-year old, or hey, we're pregnant. Should we be putting money away for college? What are we going to do?
Mhm.
And most of the time it's pretty ambiguous. Well, what if they don't go to college and all that kind of stuff? That's early stage. Late stage is, okay, we've got a kid in high school and we're there, right? We definitely are going to college. Matter of fact, we're going to have to start visiting and we're going to have to choose schools. And we got the testing and the applications and the financial aid and all the other stuff to do. So you may have done a great job early stage planning. So you have a big pile of money, but you still have a lot of work to do. And for most people, it's like, well, just because I have a big pile of money doesn't mean I want to spend it all. If I could be a little more efficient, then I probably should because I have other goals and other, ways to spend money. If I can, cut 20 or 30 or 50% off the cost of college, I certainly would like to. At least most people would. And I think that's kind of the process, right? So in the late stage, now we're talking about things like financial aid and tax planning and visiting schools. So there's the kind of the big picture things that a lot of families need to think about, like how are we going to be fair? If one kid gets accepted to Harvard at 90,000 a year and the next kid goes to the local state school at 30,000 a year,
Mhm.
do we just pay whatever the bills are, or does one kid get a check to balance it out so that they each get equal dollars? And I've had families go both ways there. There's no right or wrong. It's just something to think about so that as you're working, as you have the family meeting or as you're working through this, the parents agree and, kind of have a unified front as far as, well, this is the way we're going to do it. And no, we're not willing to spend that kind of money. Or, again, I've had families in the past, especially, they would say, it doesn't matter what college, we'll pay for it. We just are struggling with how to do it efficiently and how to find the college.
Yeah.
People don't say that anymore
Yeah.
because the price has gone up so dramatically at many of these colleges.
Yeah, which brings me to an interesting question is because a lot of the audience out there, they are executives, they're professionals, they're business minded, they've had really good careers through, medicine, dentistry, law. And so, for example, how does your company help the audience with their kids, and how is it different? Because I can kind of put it into a couple buckets. One is the underrepresented. There's the athlete, there's the academic superstar, and there's kind of the people in the middle, and then also the kids coming from rich families. So where does your company fit into all that, and how does it help serve the clients? And how is it different than, kind of mainstream?
Right. Well, I think one of the big differences is there's a lot of people out there that are helping students. So they're going to help the students figure out what they want to be when they grow up. There's some companies out there that are Harvard or bust, where they're going to try and package your student is kind of the way they describe it, where they make sure they do the right extracurricular activities and take the right courses and get all the test prep. And, they do all that stuff in a goal to make your student competitive at the most competitive colleges.
Mm.
And whether you pursue that or not is, your own decision. I don't think it's worth it, but some do. So, so there's all that. But I help on the other side of it, I help parents and with what the parents need to do. In other words,
Yeah.
will we qualify for need-based aid? Will we qualify for merit aid? Should we spend 90,000 a year because we can? Or should we say, How about 60 or 30? A lot of times families will say the flagship state school in my state is 35,000
Yeah.
and it's ranked pretty good and it's pretty strong school. Why would I go anywhere else? And my answer to that is, I don't know. You
Mm.
might want to go there. That might be the good fit. But then a lot of times in that same conversation, they're saying, but my son or daughter doesn't like that school. Okay, well, you just answered why you wouldn't go there. They don't want to go. So yes, the math and the math all makes sense and say that's a great opportunity and a great fit from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it's not a great fit for your student. So
Mm.
sometimes there's that push and pull of, the real analytical people that have their spreadsheets and say, I don't understand that this is the best deal. Why wouldn't we just go there? And then they get the less analytical children that say, but I don't like it. I want to go here instead. And then they say, well, do I have to spend more? No, you don't have to, but apparently you're struggling with it. So I think maybe you want to, and that's the bottom line, right? Is the way the system is set up, parents are kind of responsible for college, but they're not obligated, right? You don't have to pay anything for college. But the answer then might be your student's not going to go because need-based aid is based on mom and dad, and typical high-income families, they look at mom and dad and say, well, you can afford to pay, maybe not all, but you can certainly pay a big chunk. Therefore, you're not going to get a bunch of need-based aid.
Mm.
So now the student is stuck saying, well, the cost to me is 35 or 50,000. I don't have it. And if mom and dad say, well, we're not paying it, well, then the student's probably not going to go
Yeah.
because to just say, well, dad refused to pay, therefore I should get a bunch of aid. Well, then that's, everybody would do that, right? Everybody just refused to pay. And then all the students that are broke would get help. And, but that, again, it's the system that we're in, whether we like it or not. So it's all tied to family, especially for kids that are rolling out of high school and going to college. Now, once you have a degree and you're going to grad school, the rules change. If you're part of separate from military service, if you're married, if you have children of your own, if you're part of a federally funded runaway program, there's ways to, but again, most families aren't going to say, I know how we're paying for college. Why don't you go get married? I mean, that's just doesn't seem to be a strategy that most families, are going to work with. Now, if that happens to be true, well, then by all means, you take advantage of it. So
Yeah.
that's, kind of the big picture stuff.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions because I'm really curious on this. Because I've read a lot of interesting statistics and I want to just kind of pick your brain. And so first thing is you mentioned this dichotomy where this kid comes from a rich family, but then his parents are like, I'm not going to pay, but then he can't qualify for aid because his parents are rich. So he's kind of in a double bind. What does he do? What do they do then?
Right. Well, I mean, bottom line is the kid doesn't go.
Hmm.
Right. So if they can't raise the funds, then they can't go. So
Yeah.
now again, the lowest cost state schools, theoretically, if you worked hard, worked full time and went to school part time, you probably could make a go of it. And certainly you could go to the local community colleges and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And then eventually you're independent once you turn 24. And again, most families aren't going to do that. It's literally going to put your student in a tough spot. So what I see generally is begrudgingly they say, fine, I guess I'll have to play within the rules
Hmm.
and I'll have to help. And again, sometimes it's a parent, usually the father, that says something like, I worked my way through school and blah, 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 blah. Why should I have to pay? Or and then sometimes it's one of the parents that says, I worked really hard and busted everything. And it was just really so hard. I'm willing to make it much easier for my kids, right? It was so hard. I feel like I'm scarred. I don't want that for my kids.
Hmm.
And I worked really hard. I paid for it all. And I think my kids should do the same.
Yeah.
But the reality of in all of this is the game has changed dramatically since most parents went to school,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think my total budget for 1 year of college was something like $6,000.
Yeah.
It's like 1,800 tuition and then a little bit of room and board. And at the time, I could borrow a few thousand and I could work hard in the summer and I could cover it. That system doesn't work anymore. Now the average state school is 27,000, and that's all in. That's tuition, room and board, books, fees, beer and pizza. It's the whole cost of college. But most kids, a student can borrow 5,500 as a freshman, and the rest needs to be paid out of pocket at most state schools, especially for the high income, where you're not going to get Pell grants, you're not going to get state grants. So now we're saying, okay, well, maybe the student can earn 5,000 and borrow 5,000, but they're still, 15,000 short or something like that. So that would be like a kind of a minimum low cost way for families, right? But you could spend about 15,000 and get through the local state schools typically. Now
Yeah.
you can certainly spend more because the average private school is 57,000 and the big name brand schools are all pushing 90,000 now. So Harvard and Yale and Stanford and Caltech and MIT are all in the 80, 86 to 92 kind of projected expenses for this coming year. So they're, again, very expensive for families that are earning, 500,000 or a million a year. A lot of those schools will be full price. They're going to look at your statistics, but I've seen a lot of families between 200 and 400,000 or 200 and 500,000 assume they would not get any aid and they get some. Again, it's not free. Your $90,000 a year school drops to 60,000. Still very expensive in most people's book, but again, just because you assume you're not going to get it, you don't even try. And then when you realize that you could have done it and get 30,000 off, obviously you'd want to pursue that. And then of course, you have that net cost to pay. And that's where a lot of strategies and tactics would come in, right? If you do this, you'll save a little bit of taxes. If you do that, you'll get a little more aid. If you do this, you'll get some merit aid. And there's all kinds of strategies and tactics around taxes and admissions and merit aid. And we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about all the different things that you could do. And that's, again, where I kind of help families cut through all the noise around scholarships, around negotiating with schools, all that kind of stuff, and, kind of focus in on what's a reality for your situation.
Yeah, I like that. My next question is, I was reading this article on LinkedIn this morning, and it was saying that 56% of people believe that the value of college is used like a degree is useless. I mean, for the rich folks in the educated class, education will be a component, it's a way to get ahead, especially if you want to go into medicine, law, dentistry, these types of fields that require professional, you need an education. But then, you mentioned the cost of education is rising, especially even for state school is 27,000, that's, back then that was like a private education. And so people are like, I'm not going to do that. So my question is, let's say, well, I have kind of double questions and we only have very few minutes left is, let's say a family, one is you have a family, high income, and they save for the parents, like they save like their parents are saving for their retirement and they leave nothing for the kid. And then another areas where they have a 529 plan, and let's say the kid doesn't go to college, what can they do with those funds? I'm again
Right.
not advice.
Right, exactly. Right. So in general, there's lots of safety valves. Or you have any pile of money you have for college, a lot of times you can shift it to other children. You
Yeah.
can take it out and pay penalties. There's different things you can do just depending on the program. Very seldom have I seen people get themselves into a bind where they say, I really shouldn't have saved all this money. And, that's the reality is, so it doesn't hurt to save. On the flip side, many families haven't saved enough or haven't saved at all. And now they're kind of backed into a corner and say, and I've seen families earning, $200,000, $300,000 tell me that they have no money for college and there's no way they can afford it.
Yeah.
Of course, the next guy that sits down, earns 150,000 and they're like, well, I don't understand that guy that earns 200,000. How can he not afford, I earn 150. If I earn 200, I have 50,000 a year to pay for college. It would be so easy. But the reality, it's my bigger garage theory, right? I don't care how big your garage is, it's always full. And I don't care how much you make. If you don't consciously pay attention to it, you'll learn how to spend it before you learn how to save it. And college will be a challenge because it's suddenly this new bill that you didn't expect or didn't plan for.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's always expensive, right? For the very low income, maybe their net cost per college is 5 or 10,000. But if you're low income, 5 or 10,000 feels really expensive. And then when you're middle income, maybe your net cost is 20,000, but it feels expensive. And when you're high income, your net cost of college is 40,000 or 50,000 or 70,000, and it feels expensive. And it's kind of designed in a way. That's what if you think about it, that's what need-based aid is about. If you need the aid, we'll help you. But if you don't need it, if it's not painful enough, you're not going to get it. So it's kind of set at the relatively painful settings right now where most families are like, boy, college is not fun. It hurts. Almost kind of by design. Now, on the flip side of that, there's a lot of families out there that say, college was fantastic for me, and I want that for my children. And they're willing to pay whatever it takes to make it happen. And that's why the prices keep going up, right? Colleges raised the prices, the kids still came. So they raised them again, these kids still came. And now just recently, there's this, is it worth it type of discussion going on, and I think the real answer is it worth it for this particular student, right? If you want to be an elementary ed teacher, you have no choice but to go to school for elementary ed.
Yeah.
If you want to be a rock star, do you have to go to college to be a musician? Well, no, you can just practice a lot and go do it, right? Entrepreneurs, right? You can go be an entrepreneur with or without college.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong there. But a lot of parents now are kind of saying, I think college would be good, especially college educated parents that have degrees or advanced degrees. They believe it's a good path and, because they've walked it and they lived it. But it isn't the only path. And I think that's one of the big mistakes that's come along where people talk about college for everyone. And it's like, no, not college for everyone. There's a big batch of people that start college and never finish.
Mm-hmm.
All they have is a bunch of college debt and nothing to show for it. For that group, college was not a good fit. Mm-hmm. So if you think you're on that track, you probably want to avoid it. But I think education for everyone, not necessarily college. And education could be full 4-year on-campus college. It could be living at home and going to the tech school. It could be apprenticeships. It could be the school of hard knocks. There's lots of different ways. Lots of kids are taking gap years now. So there's the challenge, I think, is now there's a wide menu, and now you have to spend the time and effort to figure out what matches for these kids, and each kid, if you have multiple kids, you realize that they're not all the same. And what works for one doesn't work for the next, right? Potty training was so easy with this kid. Same ideas didn't work over here. Or, again, whatever it is, right? But, anybody that's had multiple kids realizes that, different strokes for different kids, so to speak.
How can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah. So everything we do is at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. So that's my website. We've got our podcast there, or you can get the podcast wherever you normally get your podcasts. But there's also a lot of free resources there, a financial aid calculator to figure out if you'll qualify for aid, scholarship guide for busy parents, which again, scholarships means different things. There's private and public and all kinds of different ways. So you can learn enough to figure out where should I spend my time. 10-minute videos, there's 3 or 4 of them where you can just kind of get up to speed. Not spend a lot of time, and then decide, okay, this is where we should spend our time. These kind of scholarships, we're not going to qualify for need-based scholarships. Let's not waste our time there. Let's work on these merit scholarships over there, or whatever it is, right? So there's, again, lots of free resources. And then ultimately, if you just give us a call, there's a phone number on the website. Reach out through the, contact us or whatever works for you.
Awesome. And for all the audience out there listening, Brad, for coming on. Again, college is, like I said, it's kind of changed and there's different strategies and, depending on, so you have to find somebody that can help you and, give you sound. All of his resources will be in the links and show notes. Give his socials a like and follow. And with that, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.